introduce yourself and tell us what your position is and all that.
Okay. I'm Steve Van Norman. I'm Medical Director for Dixie Regional Medical Center and for the Southwest region of Intermountain Healthcare. And I moved here back in 1983 to do emergency medicine, and in fact did emergency medicine up until Christmas Day of 2005.
Hold on, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. I need to come just a little bit more. I'm going to have you do that again, please. Okay. And then make sure you talk straight to Brady and don't look at the camera, okay?
Right. I'm Steve Van Norman. I'm Medical Director of Dixie Regional Medical Center and the Southwest region of Intermountain Healthcare. I moved to St. George in 1983 to do emergency medicine and continued to do emergency medicine until Christmas Day of 2005. For the last 10 years, I've been the medical director here.
Great. Can you tell us what it was like working at the old 400 East campus back when you started?
Yes, when I moved here, there were 35 physicians on active staff, including myself, and it was a very collegial, small group. I knew everybody's home phone number that I needed to call in the middle of the night, and they knew who I was. I knew who they were. You know, it was a very, very personal relationship kind of feeling.
So, how was emergency medicine and trauma care back in those days?
Well, we were sort of wide but not very deep. That is, we actually had a number of specialties represented, but typically it was just a single practitioner or perhaps two practitioners. And so it was fairly easy to overwhelm that system. Or if somebody were out of town on vacation or to a conference, then we didn't have any coverage within the particular specialty.
Can you tell us about how things grew over the years and even moving over to this campus, how that progressed over the years?
Right. Within the medical staff, we just saw explosive growth. You know, we went from that 35 number I was telling you about to approximately 260 active staff members now, so it's changed dramatically in terms of the number of physicians. And we've worked hard to try to maintain that community and personal feel within the medical staff during this period of transition. But it's meant now we have typically multiple practitioners within a given specialty, and of course we've expanded the number of specialties represented.
Can you talk about some of the notable additions to the medical staff that we've seen over the years that have really made a difference for the community?
Sure. Adding neurologists was a big step, and then of course the most visible to date was adding open heart surgery. There's a lot of foundational work for that, though, as our cardiologists increased in number and in techniques that they brought to the community in order to provide the foundation for the open heart surgery. And now we're in the beginnings of an equally large transition as we add neurosurgical services here.
Maybe can you talk a little bit more about back in the 80s when you were here and the lack of services that we had and how we were able to add more and the difference that's made?
Right. Back in the 80s, we most of our heart attack patients, after we stabilized them, we would fly them to typically to Salt Lake for advanced diagnostic techniques, cardiac catheterization and intervention with catheter-based techniques or open heart surgery. We basically do none of that now. We still fly neurosurgical trauma out, but even that will change in the coming years. So another area that may not get as much attention as the open heart surgery is the neonatal intensive care unit. And having that is big, not just because of the numbers represented, but because of how disruptive that is to families. When we fly an open heart patient out, that was a big deal, and they were typically in the hospital somewhere for 3 or 4 days, back home in a week. But when you fly a baby up, they may be in the NICU for a month, and typically there are other small children in the household, and so the family is split for a month or more, with a parent trying to be up in Salt Lake and a parent trying to be down here taking care of the other children. So the NICU's made a tremendous difference for our community.
Great. Can you think back on any experience in your career that really stands out, just a great memory from the history of healthcare here at Dixie?
Well, I'm not sure I would describe this one as a big difference maker, but one that I found interesting. One evening I had a college student as a patient, and this patient had a fairly large laceration that was going to take 30 minutes to 45 minutes to close. And the patient had a test the next morning, a history test, and asked if it was okay for it was a gal, if she could look at her notes, and study while I was suturing her. And I said, sure, go ahead. And she was kind of reading a few of these questions, some, aloud, that she was puzzling over the answers. And so I was filling in this stuff for her. And she wondered how I knew the history in that detail. And it was things like Watergate and the 6 Days War in the Middle East and these sorts of things. I said, well, I was in my 20s when that happened, so I have a bit of personal recollection.
Could you talk a little bit about the transition from the old 400 East coming over here to River Road and how that went and the difference that this new campus made?
Right. The part that impacted me the most, of course, was the change in the emergency department, where we went from basically 7 beds to 30 beds. And then some of the proximities. Before, if we needed to do a CAT scan on a trauma patient, we'd basically have to wheel them through to the opposite end of the hospital to get into the scanner. And the way we designed our new emergency department, the scanner is basically in the emergency department. So being able to get our critically ill or injured patients into advanced imaging without having to leave the department made a huge difference.
How did the new campus affect the medical staff?
Yeah, it provided a platform for much more rapid expansion. Some of those years right after we built our new campus, we were adding as many as 25, 30 physicians a year, which was, again, a big number when you consider how many there were here back in 1983.
You need to tell us about the history of healthcare here?
I think one of the really special things at Dixie was how the medical staff has historically worked together. Back in the mid-'70s, as specialization started to become more prevalent throughout the nation, many communities that had just family physicians actively resisted that. I mean, that was a big threat for some family docs to have specialists come in and in their minds take over a lot of the procedures they had been doing, be perhaps more influential members in the medical community, that sort of thing. And our physicians back then, they were nervous about it too, but they accepted it and even embraced it. I mean, they helped recruit specialists into the community because it was the right thing to do for their patients. And that has made a huge difference. And that attitude has continued through to this day.
Great. Anything else? Okay.
Great
Sounds
job.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.